Welcome back, I'm Kimberly and this is Floral Art Online. You're watching one of our series of designs dissected where we look at a couple of designs and have our AI, DesignEye, look at the designs, an image of the designs in terms of the principles and elements of design and let us know what that analysis is. Our first design this week is Cascade, and it was a contemporary Cascade, so more in the waterfall style than the traditional style, which is a wired cascade, most often seen in bouquets. So my idea for this design was to have the plant material look as though it was naturally cascading down a tree. So I've used the casuarina or she oak as it drapes naturally, with some banksia foliage, which also has a natural curve to it most often, rather than straight forms of foliage. I spent some time getting the basic cascade form of the foliage in place before I put any of the other plant material in the design, because having tried this design style before, I know that it is important to get that cascading, that waterfall shape first of all, so that you don't get lost in the placement of all of the other plant material. So let's see what DesignEye has got to say for us. Looking at colour, first of all, the arrangement primarily features a variety of natural greens and browns, creating an earthy, organic feel. Small hints of yellow and orange add subtle warmth and visual interest. So the colour there mightn't be as clear in this image, but it's from the kangaroo paw and the grevillea placements and the banksia flower placements that are hidden within the cascade. The lines in the design are predominantly vertical and cascading, formed by the branches, foliage and hanging elements. This creates a sense of movement and fluidity. The lines are organic and irregular, adding to the natural feel. So the time that I took to get those foliage placements, those curving lines, the cascading lines in the right spots has paid off for me in terms of how the impression that the design gives overall. For shape, the arrangement incorporates a variety of organic shapes, including the spiky forms of the banksia pods and the long flowing lines of the foliage. This variety creates a visual interest and mimics the shape found in nature. Once again, I'm glad that I took the time to get that basic structure right. The textures in the design are diverse and tactile. The rough bark of the wood base contrasts with the spiky pods and the smooth, soft foliage. This variation in texture adds depth and complexity to the arrangement. So if you've looked at any of the other analyses that we've done through DesignEye, it often talks about getting things in terms of the principles and elements of design, of getting everything cohesive, and it looks like in this one it's very happy with the way that I'm putting everything together. So if we look at space, the design uses negative space effectively between the cascading elements. This allows the individual components to stand out and creates a sense of airiness and lightness despite the overall density of the foliage. Now, one of the issues with doing this type of design is that it is so easy to make it too solid a mass because you're trying to get that line. So my thinking was that casuarina foliage, because it has that natural cascading effect, was going to give me a really good framework and I wouldn't play around with it too much. So the design appears to be asymmetrical, with the majority of the visual weight on the upper part of the arrangement. However, the use of the sturdy wood base helps to ground the design and create a sense of overall balance. So that was important, that it didn't become too top heavy with all of that placement at the top. Emphasis. The focal point of the design is the cascading foliage, which draws the eye downwards. The contrasting textures and colours further enhance this focal point. In terms of movement, the design has a strong sense of downward movement due to the cascading lines of the foliage and the hanging elements. So once again, it's reinforcing all of these. That placement is ticking the boxes of all of these things that we're normally judged on. This creates a sense of energy. The elements in the design are well proportioned to each other and to the overall size of the piece. The scale feels harmonious, so I've used the right proportions of plant material one to another, and the scale, so the sizing of them, is correct in terms of one another as well. Rhythm. There's a sense of rhythm created by the repetition of similar shapes of the foliage and flowers. This repetition creates a visual pattern that guides the eye through the design. The design achieves unity through the use of a limited colour palette and the repetition of organic shapes and the overall theme of nature. So let's now think about how it could be improved. The design could benefit from a more defined focal point. While the cascading foliage is eye-catching, a larger or more unusual element could be added to the top to draw the eye and create a strong visual anchor. So it's not talking about taking away the feel of the cascade, it's talking about anchor at the top and then come down. The design could also benefit from a more varied colour palette. While the natural colours are beautiful, a few pops of brighter colours such as red or purple could add interest and contrast. So that's an interesting suggestion. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I would certainly try it out to see whether, in a judging sense, that made a difference to the design. I quite like the bright yellow of the kangaroo paw, and I think that's enough to brighten it, to bring it out from the muted, natural, earthy tones. So in summary, overall this is a beautiful and creative floral design that effectively captures the essence of a natural cascade. It is a visually interesting and well-balanced composition that utilises the principles and elements of design to create a harmonious and evocative piece. With a few minor adjustments, it could be made even more impactful. I will say that this design placed first, and I was pretty happy because I placed first against one of my perennial competitors who always beats me in this class. So I think that taking the time to get that foliage placement right has just given me enough of an edge to take me over the line for first place. Let's now look at our second design. The second design up for analysis this week is Breaking with Tradition. So definitely a contemporary design and something where we could really push the boundaries of what was acceptable in terms of a staged competition design. So what I've done is, using a cork mat as the base, I've repurposed two sections of a wire basket, painted them blue to match the bottle caps from the plastic bottles, and the bottles have the water source for the fresh plant material. So I've attached them with cable ties in the same colour. What I wanted to do was repeat that colour. The water in the bottles is a small amount of food colouring, which helps repeat the colour of the flowers that I've used in the design. So there's grevillea flowers, which are a little bit hard to see, but they are there, and they are that pinky reddy colour. The remainder of the design has what we affectionately call paper curlicues. So it's just flattened rolls of paper that have been wrapped into circles. This was to test whether the judges would allow me to use paper. It was sort of the in-between stage when paper was acceptable in some competitions and not others because it hadn't been recognised as a plant-based material. So as you can see, this design placed first. Let's see what DesignEye says about the design. As we always start with colour, let's look at colour. The design predominantly features pink and green with accents of blue. The pink is vivid and eye-catching, while the green provides a natural complement. The overall effect is vibrant and energetic. The lines in the design are created by the stems of the flowers, the wire frame, and the placement of the recycled bottles. The lines are predominantly vertical and angular, creating a sense of structure and stability, but are also offset by the organic curves of the foliage, and I would say also the somewhat circular form of the bottles as well. Shape. The design incorporates a variety of shapes, including the roundness, tubular forms of the bottles, and the angularity of the wire frame. This creates visual interest and contrast. The textures in the design are varied and tactile. The bottles are smooth and glossy, whilst the wire frame adds a metallic texture, and the foliage has a soft, delicate texture. So quite a range of contrasts, as well as the repetition that I was looking for in the colours that I talked about earlier. Space. The design uses negative space effectively with open areas between the elements. This allows for the individual components to stand out and creates a sense of airiness and lightness. The design appears to be asymmetrical, although there is visual weight on the left side due to the taller foliage. However, the use of colour and repetition of elements across the design helps to achieve a sense of overall balance. So once again, it's not always about the visual, physical balance of the plant material or the elements or the parts of the design that you've got there. Sometimes that can be the repetition of something. So here we've got the colour and the repetition of the shapes that we've used has helped to create balance, a visual balance in the design, regardless of where the visual weight happens to be, or appears to be. Emphasis. The focal point of the design is likely the central cluster of flowers and foliage within the wire frame. The colour and the height of this element draw the eye. For movement, the design has a sense of upward movement due to the vertical lines of the wire frame and the stems of the foliage. This is enhanced by the placement of the bottles, which seem to be climbing the structure. And that's an interesting comment because it's not something that I actively thought about doing. It's just that I wanted to have the bottles at different angles. I wanted to do the horizontal as well as the vertical placements of those. So I've learned something out of this already. Proportion. The elements in the design are well proportioned to each other and to the overall size of the piece. The scale of the wire frame, the bottles and the floral elements feel harmonious. There's a sense of rhythm created by the repetition of the bottles. This repetition creates a visual pattern that guides the eye through the design, and that's exactly what I wanted it to do, so I'm very happy that that was apparent to DesignEye. The design achieves unity through the use of a limited colour palette, the repetition of the elements and the overall theme of upcycling and sustainability. So I find that quite fascinating that an artificial intelligence entity has looked at this and decided that there's a theme of upcycling and sustainability throughout it, which I didn't give it in the instructions, I just merely gave it the title. And so how much is that going to help long term in us being able to educate ourselves about improving our designs when it can pick out those things for us? The suggestions from it now, the design could benefit from a more defined focal point. While the foliage is eye-catching, it could be made more prominent through the use of a larger or more unusual flower. The design could be made more dynamic by incorporating more curved lines or diagonal elements. So I think the diagonal element would have worked, and I would certainly take that on board. This would add a sense of movement and energy to the composition. It could also be made more cohesive by incorporating more natural elements into the wire frame, for example, weaving vines or leaves through the wire. And I very much agree with that. When I look at it now, I think that the wire frame is quite dominant, and I would like to have incorporated some other more appropriate plant material into that. I could still have that pattern, that checkerboard pattern, by weaving, as it said, some leaves through the wire, but it wouldn't be a non-plant material element that was staring me in the face. This is the way I feel. So our overall summary: this is a creative and thought-provoking floral design that successfully breaks with tradition. It is a visually interesting and well-balanced composition that effectively utilises the principles and elements of design. With a few minor adjustments, it could be made even more impactful. And I think that's true. I think that, I'm obviously more than happy with getting the first place. And the judges' comments were along the lines that this was the only design that was presented that truly broke with tradition in terms of the overall design and the elements within the design. So I managed to actually tell the judge what I was doing with the interpretation that I presented on the bench, which is always a good thing. So there we have it. That's our two designs for this week: Cascade, the contemporary Cascade, and Breaking with Tradition. There are lots more in the series, and always, if you want to include and have your own designs assessed and analysed by our AI, you simply go to the website and submit your image, and within a couple of hours you'll have your analysis back. I will reassure you, we do look at the analysis before we send it out to you to make sure that it is in line and it is going to help you with your design. So you can be reassured that although it is an AI analysis, there is a human supervising it at this point to make sure that it is useful for you. That's it for Design Dissected this week. I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Online.